Good morning and thanks for joining me. Today I'm bringing you a sermon based on the writings of Rene Padilla, an Ecuadorian theologian who wrote about how justice and peace are inextricably linked. I hope you'll join me. Let's dig in. Rene Padilla is an evangelical thought leader from Latin America. He was born in 1932 and passed away in 2021. When I read his article, The Fruit of Justice Will Be Peace, which was published in 1985, I couldn't help but see how all of the concepts he was talking about are so relevant to us here in Canada today. The social injustices that happen in our world need to be dealt with and need to be worked against in order to bring peace. You can't have peace without justice. And this is the root of what Padilla says. He was born in Ecuador and grew up in Bogota, Colombia. He faced oppression throughout his life growing up there, and he even faced physical violence, carrying the scars of stones that had been thrown at him. He is credited with developing a framework that's been adopted by over 500 global Christian missions and relief organizations, including World Vision. He's credited with coining the term integral mission. Integral mission means tying together social action and evangelism. In Padilla's words, these are two wings of a plane. And what he says rings true today. We cannot achieve peace anywhere in the world while we have injustice. So what are these two terms, injustice and peace? I think it's important for us to define them. Justice, in the Cambridge Dictionary, justice is defined as fairness in the way people are dealt with. Justice is about fairness in the way people are dealt with. When people are dealt with fairly, Padilla says it brings peace, but not just any peace, it brings shalom. He describes shalom as harmony, well-being, wholeness, abundance, prosperity, health, happiness, fulfillment, both for the individual and for society. So this kind of peace, this shalom, is only achieved when there is justice for all. When we look at our society today and we see people who are going hungry, people who are without housing, these are injustices that mean we can never have true peace while this is going on, while this is happening around us. Padilla notes that we must seek justice because that is what Jesus did. And we are here modeling what Jesus did and carrying out the mandate that he left for us. Padilla says, let us follow the way of him who was anointed to preach good news to the poor, freedom for the prisoners, recovery of sight for the blind, and liberation for the oppressed. He's referring to Jesus here, our Lord, who is also called the Prince of Peace. I love that we refer to Jesus and that the Bible refers to Jesus as the Prince of Peace. As followers of the way, this is the way of Jesus. We're called to care about social justice issues. We're called to care about those who are overlooked in our community, the most vulnerable people in our communities. This is who Jesus went to time and time again, to the woman at the well, to the lepers, to the blind. Jesus came here for the least of us. And as followers of the way, we are also to be here for those in our community who are vulnerable, who are overlooked, and who are marginalized. Because we're called to stand up for social justice issues that are facing our world today, Padilla explains that justice results in peace. This is why we're doing it. Injustice, he says, results in violence. If you look around our world today, I think you can agree that there is a lot of violence happening. There are wars raging around the world. There is violence in our own communities. And this is a result of injustice. Injustice breeds violence. In a violent and often dark world, we as Christians serve the Prince of Peace. We are extensions of him. We're carrying the good news of the gospel and carrying outstretched arms. And we're carrying this good news to those who are suffering. So how do we see this in our own context in Canada today? There are various social pressures creating unrest here, including political and global tensions. We live in a very multicultural country, and the world is at our doorstep here. So we're seeing all kinds of tensions. Perhaps one of the biggest pressures, however, today in Canada in 2024 is economic. The cost of living has soared since the pandemic, with inflation driving up food prices, rent prices, housing. Virtually every area of society is affected, but it's really the most vulnerable who are facing dire consequences. A rent or a mortgage increase can mean going hungry or losing your housing or apartment altogether. Many people in Canada are finding themselves in this state today. This is all over the news. CBC Toronto just reported that food banks in Toronto are seeing 1 million more visits this year than last year. 1 million more visits to Toronto food banks alone in 1 year. That is a 38% increase from last year, and that is nearly 4 times the number of visits than before the pandemic. Food Banks Canada has come out with a report that is showing a 90% increase in food bank usage from 2019, pre-pandemic, to 2024. A 90% increase in the usage of food banks across Canada from 2019 to 2024. I thought that bared repeating. The organization says there are signs that the food banking system is reaching its absolute limit. It notes that in March of 2024 alone, food banks across Canada received 2 million visits. That's across Canada in 1 month. Add to that the Canada-wide housing crisis, with an estimated 40,000 people who will be looking for somewhere to sleep tonight. That's a true stat. 40,000 people in Canada tonight will be looking for somewhere to sleep. They may go to a friend's couch, they may be in a shelter, they may be living in an encampment, or they may be trying to find a safe, out-of-the-way place where they can sleep peacefully and not be subjected to violence or cold or weather. That is a staggering statistic. These are just some of the social justice issues that many Canadians are facing today, including in our own community. I live here in Uxbridge, Ontario. It's a rural community, and we are seeing the housing crunch here. We are hearing from people who were born and raised in this town who cannot afford to rent an apartment. There are no affordable options for them. Our food bank usage here is through the roof. They've never seen anything like it before. We as a church are called to care about this. We are called to care about the issues that are facing Canadians today and that are facing our individual communities today. It's important, yes, that we meet for Sunday services. It's so important that we do that. But then we also must go out beyond our walls into the community. This is a two-step process. Much of the church culture in the Western world does step one really well. We love to come together on Sundays, to pray together, to worship together. We encourage one another. We hear inspirational messages, but often many of us stop there. We feel filled up for the week and we head home and jump back into our weekly routines, and we're busy, and then we go back on Sunday to be refilled. But there is a second step to being a Christian, and that is taking our love for Christ beyond our church walls. I love this quote from Milburn Thompson in his book, Justice and Peace. He says, "Christians must be hearers of the word, that is, attentive to the presence and call of God in their lives, and doers of the word, actively responding to God's call in the world." Did you hear that? That was a two-step process. Hearers of the word and doers of the word. Come to church and then go out into community. Thompson encourages Christians to be doers of the word as part of their faith community, and he stresses the importance of bolstering one another in this work. So fight against social injustice, go out and make a difference, but do it as part of your church, as part of your faith community, so that you're not doing it alone. There's dangers in doing it alone. Doing it together means you can cover each other in prayer, in faithful support, and in encouragement. Another quote from him, he notes, "A faith community can support the individual Christian in the sometimes risky and often painful struggle to overcome injustice, and it can challenge its members to continue to strive to transform society into a just community." So community is super important for us to be a part of and making a difference, but also for our faith community to support one another and cover each other in prayer and encouragement. It's not always comfortable going out into the world. We like to be comfortable. We get very comfy in our regular seats at church with our church family who we've come to know and love so dearly. It's a nice feeling. It's safe, it's peaceful, we feel restored, we feel filled up, and that's good. That is a good thing. But it must not end there. Also, spending time alone in prayer. I know many of us do this. We have our devotionals that we do at home. We do our Bible readings, and we spend this personal time connecting with Jesus. That's also so important. So important for us to hear from the Lord in our personal relationship with Him. But then we're called to go out into the world, carrying the love and the light of our Creator. In the book, The God of Intimacy in Action, Mary Albert Darling writes that we must be careful not to succumb to either one of two garden temptations: staying in the garden so much that we do not notice the needs outside, or not going into the garden at all because we are too busy responding to the voices of woe. I really like how she puts this. The garden is the time we spend with the Lord. When we're in the garden, we are refilling and connecting and hearing from our Lord. And that's a beautiful thing to do. But we also need to find the balance, ensuring that we are going out of the garden and taking the Lord's love and care and message of the gospel to our communities and to those who need it most, to our most vulnerable people. It's the justice and the peace. All of this is inextricably linked. What does that look like for you locally? For me here in Uxbridge, it looks like the Uxbridge Loaves and Fishes Food Bank. It looks like North House, which helps find housing for those who are suffering a housing crisis in North Durham region. It looks like the Sunrise Pregnancy and Family Support Center, where volunteers are desperately needed. And all of this is important. And it is bringing those who are in need into community and bringing volunteers to them. Perhaps the Lord has put something on your heart that isn't being tended to. Perhaps there is a gap and He has put that on your heart for you to step into and to see how you can minister to those around you. There's a really moving testimony that I wanted to share with you. And during my research for this sermon, I discovered it. It's written by a lady named Betty Prize. And she shares that when she was in her 20s, she was a pastoral intern in an inner city urban area. And she received a call one day at the church. It was from a woman who was needing financial assistance to help get her through to her next welfare payment. And the woman was angry. She was angry that the congregation hadn't done more for her up to this point. She was yelling at Betty on the phone, and she even threatened to come by the church and shoot her. Betty, in her 20s, decided she needed to go to this woman's house and visit with her. I love perhaps the naivete of a 20-year-old, because I don't know that that would have been my first thought, to go to this woman's house if she's threatened to shoot me, but this is what Betty decided to do. So she got on the subway, and as she was riding the subway, she prayed the whole way there. And she prayed that God would go before her and prepare the way, and that she would see God's face in this woman. She wanted to see God's face in her and to just understand this is God's person who He has created. He loves her. She wanted to see that face of God in her just to help her make that connection that she's fighting and doing the right thing here. After arriving at the woman's house, she forgot about her prayer, and they went about talking and having their visit. And as she was peering into the woman's empty fridge, the woman was crouched down and looked up at her, and there it was. The face of God was peering up at Betty. She was completely overwhelmed with love. Her legs were buckling at the awe of seeing God's face on this woman. He had answered her prayer so faithfully. And it was radiating. The face of God was radiating out from this woman towards her. She says, I was in awe. This woman, who by the world's standards didn't measure up in any way, was radiating the face of God at me. As Betty rode the subway home, still in awe of what had happened, the face of God appeared on a subway rider, and then another, and then another. She says, everywhere I turned, the face of God radiated back at me. By now, I was reeling in awe. If the face of God was present in this woman and in each of the subway riders, could it be that the face of God was also present in me? The whole experience left her with the wisdom that judging others as better than or less than, what she calls a spirit of judgment, begins to disappear when we're rooted in God. Without judgment, we see the world through God's eyes. The others' needs become our needs, and their pain, our pain. End quote. The creator of this world is a just God, and he is also the Prince of Peace. He is reconciling the world to him and has asked us to join along in the process, in this mission as followers of the way. I think it's important to note that everybody who serves the Lord has a different capacity, and so everybody serves in a different way. It's a prayerful thing that each person has to figure out for themselves. Be prayerful in how God wants to use you. Spend time in the garden seeking his will, and remember to return to the garden often to renew and restore yourself in his presence. That is so important to remember. How you serve will look differently from how others serve. It's important to note that this kind of justice ministry needs to look at immediate needs, food and shelter, but it also needs to look at root causes and unjust systems that are creating the problems in the first place. Perhaps this is a call to our next generation to be looking at the bigger picture of what's going on here. Why are these injustices occurring? The questions need to be asked. We need to look upstream to see what is causing the housing crisis, what is causing people to be on or under the poverty line, what systems are in place that are creating this situation. Is there a traditional way of doing things that is oppressive? David Hilfiker says in The Limits of Charity that charity does little to change the wider social political systems that sustain injustice. Charity offends almost no one. At one point or another, justice offends practically everyone. He's making a distinction here between charity and justice. Charity is something where we can donate money to a cause. And of course, that doesn't challenge any social systems that are in place that are causing issues. It just helps as a Band-Aid to meet direct and immediate needs. And it is important because we don't want people going hungry. So charity is important, but it doesn't offend anybody. Injustice at some point offends everybody. Justice offends practically everyone because justice is a changing of the way. It's a changing of the systems that are created to oppress people, that are created to treat people unfairly. God is actively reconciling the world to him, one by one, and we as Christians are asked to join in. Seeking justice for the vulnerable is faith in action. We're participating in God's plan for peace for all, for true shalom. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. It's directly in the Lord's Prayer. The Lord is working to reconcile us to him so that as it is done in heaven, it will be done here on the earth. And I'd like to just end off with Padilla, who notes that in Isaiah 32, there's a prophetic vision of peace. And he says, quote, "It is in line with Mosaic revelation and places justice and peace in a relationship of cause and effect. The fruit or work of justice will be peace." I hope this has given you lots of food for thought today, and I'm praying for you as you think about where you can connect in your community and make a difference. Thank you for listening, and God bless you.